The carpentry craft is changing. A very warm welcome to Ligna TV. We are talking about the increasing number and size of companies supplying furniture parts to carpentries, and asking the question whether carpenters will only be an assembler in the future and whether traditional carpentry is dying out because of part suppliers. And now I would like to welcome my guests. Närdemann, Chief Editor of BM, Wolfgang Thorwesten, Managing Director of Horatec, and Wilhelm Freund, Master Carpenter and owner of the Dein, Freund Carpentry. Mr. Närdemann, there are ever more suppliers of furniture parts for carpenters. Do you think it is a curse or a blessing?
Well, clearly it's not possible to answer the question whether it's a curse or a blessing with a simple yes or no. But I think it's very important for every company, for every carpenter and cabinet maker, to at least be clued up about the subject. That they look into the options for cooperation, both large and small scale, to then in the end be able to make a clear decision as to how they can secure their piece of the pie, or that it's not a pie that they even want a piece of. It would be a massive mistake to ignore the subject and to say we've always done things our way and we'll continue to do so. They have to be open and look around at what chances are out there to be had.
You talk a lot to carpenters in Germany. What are they saying?
Well, the spectrum is very broad. I know carpenters and cabinet makers who, with their one or two person company, do indeed trust in their cooperation with a larger supplier, because their core skill lies in being there for the customer, in advising them on complex matters. And this know-how must absolutely be kept within the craft trade. There are other companies that have the technological possibilities to perfectly produce standard as well as more challenging furniture themselves with their machinery. And so it might be of interest to them to help others with order peaks. I would say we have all possibilities for cooperation somewhere between these two extremes.
Whether a blessing or a curse, the carpentry trade is changing considerably. We paid a visit to a carpentry that is flourishing without big part suppliers, namely Mr. Freund, our studio guest's carpentry shop.
Tischlerei Dein, Freund in Wedemark near Hanover was founded in 1999. It all started with a workshop of 30 square meters. Today, production takes place on 1,000 square meters. Wilhelm Freund has focused his business on high-quality furniture and interior design. Modern machinery is therefore essential. Everything is manufactured in-house.
The clear advantage are our trained employees who really know the material and the machines. They often need to install our products for our customers and need to identify with those products. That is what makes us strong.
The 42-year-old master carpenter currently has 8 employees. Even though machines are getting more and more modern and require more technical expertise than craftsmanship, he still very much values training.
Professional honor is fundamental to us. We want to keep the spirit of the guild alive with all its possibilities, especially in the solid timber industry, which is somehow dying in our sector because of the availability of panel materials. But of course we try to keep this spirit alive in our professional training.
Wilhelm Freund does not purchase from large suppliers as of now. On the other hand, his colleagues often purchase from him. But the master carpenter doesn't necessarily rule it out.
Mr. Freund, you don't work with large part suppliers, at least not yet. For what kind of orders could a cooperation make sense?
Well, we have one for window construction because that's not our specialist area. We don't have the possibilities. And for us, when actually producing furniture, it's difficult to outsource the planning skills. So we train our employees. Of course, we motivate them, the colleagues in work preparation. And of course, we also process products that are very, very difficult to buy in, because we have different materials with strongly imprinted surfaces. For example, old wood or concrete appearances. And so for us, it's a bit of a byproduct, the corpus. That arises by itself. We have that option.
Mr. Närdemann, do you see similar things happening on the market, or is Mr. Freund a typical example here?
I think what Mr. Freund said is good. Firstly, very interesting because he can obviously produce everything that leaves his workshop himself. And secondly, he is clearly living from supplying colleagues who rely on his know-how there. And I think it's very interesting to think about what that means. Cooperation doesn't necessarily have to mean for everyone that they're buying things in. It can, of course, also mean that I'm a specialist company and that I can then support other colleagues with my know-how and expertise. So basically, you're also a supplier, if you will, but you're doing it in your own way.
We also have a very big part supplier here with us today with Horatec. Mr. Thorwesten, we are going to show a short clip about a carpentry customer of yours now and about your production.
Michael Haller manages this carpentry workshop in Nienburg in the third generation. The master workshop has a real sense of tradition, but also has a clear focus on the future. For 3 years, they have been cooperating with Horatec, a company from Hövelhof that produces prefabricated furniture parts for the carpentry industry. The perfect partner for this 6-man business.
Because my small carpentry with its standard machines can't offer the quality that our cooperation with Horatec can to our customers. That is to say, Horatec offers a quality that is higher than my small carpentry with its machine could ever offer.
Horatec has been producing at its site in Hövelhof since 1996. Since last year, they can now produce with twice the capacity thanks to their second site. The company wants to make carpenters and cabinet makers more productive and more flexible. Over 2,000 companies now regularly order prefabricated furniture parts. The company exclusively produces for carpenters and cabinet makers, starting from batch size 1. The delivery time is between 7 and 10 days. The prefabricated furniture parts producer does not think of himself as competition, but rather as a partner to carpenters and cabinet makers. This is a partnership that Michael Haller values as well.
I don't see Horatec as a competitor, but as quite the opposite. They support me in the projects I want to realize for my customers. Whether it's in the planning phase or milling handles or building revolving doors, they take care of it for me. I don't need to think about how to hinge the door, what type of hinge I need to use, about inner drawers each time I design a cupboard for a customer. The planning software takes care of all of that for me. While the company is producing these projects, I can work on something else.
Das wird mir alles schon in der Planungssoftware von Horatec abgenommen. In der Zeit, wo die Firma für mich diese Projekte herstellt, kann ich mich wieder anderen Sachen widmen.
A cooperation that works. This could be a model for tomorrow's carpenter.
Mr. Thorwesten, what speaks in favor of a partnership with a big part supplier?
Well, I think our customer Michael Haller has already explained that very well. Quite simply, I think our customers, carpenters, benefit from a technology that we've built up over the last 20 years. That's how long we've been on the market. But also processes that nowadays are referred to with this big word, Industry 4.0. We've put in a lot of effort here to also put our customers in the position to acquire orders that they wouldn't necessarily have got without us. So I think that with a lot of customers today, we're generating orders in an area that would otherwise have gone to a completely different sector, maybe to the furniture retail sector. We truly see ourselves as a partner and not as a competitor. We don't sell to end customers either.
End customers was exactly what I wanted to ask next. Where's my guarantee that you really aren't going to go to end customers?
Well, like I already said, we've been on the market for 20 years, and we've remained true to a very clear sales philosophy for 20 years. We've been selling to craft carpenters for 20 years via Egger Light Handle. And I have to say that we've been very successful with that model, so why would we change a successful model? Well, I don't think that we need to be talking about fears necessarily. We have window makers who supply directly. We have staircase makers who supply directly. So fears. There's maybe a market right on your doorstep in the region, and Horatec, Primon, Hövelhof. That was it, yeah. So they're not going to conquer the whole of Germany. And I think it's up to ourselves to have that trust And I've been aware of Horatec for over 17 years now. We got to know each other 17 years ago. And in that time, I haven't found a single customer who has planned and bought a wardrobe, for example, there exactly themselves.
Trust is important, of course. Mr. Närdemann, Horatec is one of many. How do I know that the others won't suddenly target end customers?
Well, I would say if Mr. Thorwesten were to say he's going to go to the end customers, the same applies to all of the big players out there on the supplier market. He would more or less be betraying his customers, and he doesn't want to do that. Mr. Thorwesten is loyal to the craft carpenter target group, and so he can't at the same time go into direct competition with his own major customers. The one cancels the other out, as I see it. And like you just said, other areas have been working with suppliers for decades. An inside door, a staircase, a window. No carpenter is going to build that themselves if they only do it every now and again. And that's why when we talk about furniture parts suppliers, we're by no means talking about a sudden phenomenon. Maybe it's a passion for craftsmanship that we see in furniture making, but of course we also have to look at things from a business point of view.
Back to my question, is there really no chance whatsoever that the others will start targeting the end customer?
Well, I would say that nothing can be ruled out. There are indeed large platforms on the market with configuration tools that can be operated by the end customers at home on their sofas. We have to keep a close eye on that, and as I see it, simply try to give the craft sector the same tools as these platforms have, who basically skip a step and go straight to the end customers.
We also talked to Dr. Johann Quatmann. He is head of the Tischler NRW Association. We recorded the interview yesterday because he's otherwise engaged. Mr. Quatmann, thank you for taking the time to be here. Lots of things are changing in the craft sector at the moment. What can you observe there?
We currently see a lot of changes on the market, particularly with suppliers who are increasingly intervening in the production depth of medium-sized carpentries by expanding their portfolios to cover things that originally were produced by carpenters, and where carpentries have the production skills. And that does indeed lead to changes on the market, and opinions are very much divided here. On the one hand, there's the company view, where companies say it can make sense to extend their own portfolio where they are maybe not big enough to invest in machines to offer such products. On the other hand, we have the association's political perspective that sees value creation being taken away from carpentries and transferred to industry, and of course that is a cause for concern.
What impact does this have on training? Can purely assembly-based companies offer training at all anymore?
Well, firstly, it doesn't necessarily mean that these companies become only planning and assembly companies. I think there's still sufficient production potential there, despite these suppliers. There are still enough workshops there, which of course are needed for training. But even companies that are only assembling still have the possibility to offer training as part of a collaborative training network.
How does a company have to be oriented to survive on the market?
I think if we want to continue to benefit from the production skills of carpentries and want to fully position carpentries, which have an average of 7 employees, on the market, then I think these companies have to collaborate with each other. I think a lot of companies will not be able to make these considerable investments, which are particularly needed for digitalization, on their own. So I think it does make sense to look for colleagues to network with, to be able to offer as complete a program as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Quatmann. Mr. Freund, won't we lose know-how if we purchase more and more parts?
Yes, I think so. And that's maybe our advantage, that we can take employees under our wing and train them further. We have some really top young talent out there who are totally motivated, and who are of course out there in the digital world for us. Some other companies might be lacking that. And it all starts with the designers, who have their high school diploma. They come to us as interns. They even go back to working with the software, because they want to work on a virtual level. So if we were to get rid of them, well, it's important for the customer. It's important that we're authentic. And if something goes wrong, it's important that we can react immediately, even if that means a night shift, to then be able to reproduce the parts ourselves in 2, 3, even 5 hours. And I think that's where we excel. And on the question of taking something away from us, I think Horatec, amongst others, they also have their limits. They can't just go and drink Prosecco with the customers. They can't sell them concrete surfaces. So why should I be worried about that? And if I need 12-meter-long corpuses, then I order them there. We have the software. We send that over to them, and he's also grateful that he doesn't have to go to the customer, I think.
Mr. Närdemann, how do you see the market in general? Are we losing know-how in the market?
The craft sector is changing at the moment. And it's a simple fact that the distinction between craft and industry is no longer as clear as it was 5 years ago, perhaps. We really have to observe these technical developments that are now very much underway in small companies as well. And we have to be incredibly careful that the employees in these companies don't lose their expertise because they're only ever operating big machines. I think that's a really critical point that we need to bear in mind. But on the other hand, we're faced with a severe lack of specialist workers, and that's going to be a huge problem in years to come. So that means we have to find a compromise between retaining this know-how, whilst also using the technology to deliver really great craft products. And third-party suppliers can support us there, but it's not essential.
Mr. Thorwesten, what do you think? Is the craftsman profession changing?
Yes. Craftsmanship has been changing for many years. We're in the middle of a permanent change process, and, in my opinion, I feel that this change has intensified during the last few years. As Mr. Närdemann already said, I think all of us are facing the same problem. In coming years, we need to think about ways to motivate young people to begin a training program in crafts. And as I see it, much fewer people, young people, are choosing to become carpenters, joiners or wood mechanics. Of course we're facing the same problem. Today we need to take measures to get young people into our company that we didn't have to do maybe 10 years ago. That's a change on the employee side that concerns every company. And I agree with Mr. Närdemann here. You can't look at it in a too black and white way. There are good reasons to purchase things sometimes, and that's the same thing when you have a company, like Mr. Freund. And each company needs to find the right way for itself. I think there's no black and white here. It's something that everyone needs to decide for themselves.
Which brings me to my last question. It's really about how companies will need to position themselves in the future. Mr. Quatmann mentioned it in the interview. Companies will need to network and to cooperate to be able to offer everything. What do you think, Mr. Freund? How does a company need to position itself nowadays to be able to survive on the market?
Well, I'm talking about digitalization. I think you could say, as Mr. Thorwesten just said, Industry 4.0, Business 4.0. But there is just a lack of impulses. The colleagues are sometimes not courageous enough. They're scared about the technology, be it a machine, even a smartphone or a beautiful digital watch. But that's what networking is. Young people don't want any hassle. They also don't want to pester us. And that's how you can motivate them. I think the market is actually much bigger. So if we work together more, there is, by the way, a great trade journal, we can create incentives. We could become more and more active on the market, and then of course we could take over Mr. Thorwesten's large capacities at Horatec, or whatever they're called. So, you know, there is more to it.
We could do much more, Mr. Närdemann.
Much more, for sure. I also think to mention that once more, that you can't underestimate that local networking, which is nothing new, by the way. But it didn't prevail, partly because it's incredibly difficult to create the necessary processes. I think what we need is someone who drives the change. That's where we, as Horatec, are responsible for processes. We drive those processes. And in these local networks, we need someone to drive them too. That's why I think that that model is difficult, to be honest. You can see why it's difficult when you have a look at today's product ranges. Whether it's a panel or a fitting, all of that, none of it's becoming simpler whatsoever. The world is becoming increasingly complex, and we can see every day how difficult mastering it is.
Mr. Närdemann, my last question for you. How does a carpenter today need to position himself?
All I can say to carpenters is, talk to each other and find out where your individual strengths are. I'm convinced that regional networks, too, also have a bright future. That the CNC machine of Carpenter Müller can be of good service to Carpenter Huber in the neighbouring village. Cooperation doesn't have to mean that you only work together with the large suppliers, who, of course, also have their strengths. It already starts with talking to my colleagues, thinking about how we can communicate our craft, our products and our services, and to make sure that the market recognises them as being competitive. That is in part a common task.
There's definitely a lot in store for the carpentry sector. Thank you for this interesting discussion, your contributions, and thank you for watching. Take care and see you soon.